are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to a Wednesday edition of the show. Today's episode of Locked On Eagles is brought to you by Blue Nile. This Mother's Day, give mom something she'll treasure forever with fine jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Sports listeners get $50 off $500. Use the promo code Locked On at checkout. I'm Louie and Gino. He's Gino Camilleri. Gino, we are continuing to dive into our prospect rankings for the 2022 NFL Draft because tomorrow we are only a week away from the first round of the draft. We're going to go live all throughout that first round with the Eagles on the clock at both 15th overall and 18th. Today, we're going to get into receiver. We did quarterback on Friday. We talked running back and tight end yesterday, and now is a position that Eagles fans love to get into because the Eagles they've messed it up for years, right? JJ Arcega-Whiteside in the second round, Jalen Reagor in the first. They finally get things right with DeVonta Smith last year, and you think you found a steal in Quez Watkins, but there's still work to be done, and considering the depth of this class this year, it's projected that a lot of the best players available will probably be at this position. So we'll get into it and take an entire outlook at our top 10 receivers.
I hate when people say, oh, they took position so-and-so last year. Oh, they took position so-and-so the year before. Like, last year's draft is a dead cost at this point.
Yeah,
like, it happened.
You can't do it because you made the move last year.
Yeah. Exactly. And I kind of couple that with the analogy of in baseball. Like, when somebody hits 300, that's pretty good, right? That's 3 out of 10 hits. But 7 of those 10 hits were misses. And, hey, it could have been a long, deep drive to center field that just got stopped a foot short before a home run. Same thing in drafting, man. Like, sometimes you hit a home run with DeVonta Smith, you get a grand slam with him, and sometimes you line into a double play with Jalen Reagor. Like, it does happen. You
don't want to, and I understand you want to get it right the first few times so you don't have to, keep being reactive, but at the same time, you don't not take a receiver in the top 2 rounds because you took JJ, you took Jalen Reagor. So I'm totally with you. We'll get into our rankings in segment 2 and 3. Very curious to see where we differ. I think we do agree a lot though on this position, our philosophy on receivers and what we like and dislike. But Gino, first, I just want to get into the overall outlook of this position in the NFL right now. It is fascinating. After today, another receiver could be on the move. San Francisco 49ers star receiver Deebo Samuel, he requested a trade from San Francisco. I mean, we already saw this year, Davante Adams is in Las Vegas, got paid $1.5 bags. Tyreek Hill headed to Miami for the same reason. A.J. Brown might skip voluntary workouts, or I should say mandatory too, during the offseason. It's like, I don't know, man. Our team's going to change their philosophy on receiver. I don't think it's as replaceable as running back, and having a top receiver is far more valuable. So I don't think teams are suddenly going to stop taking them high and not pay them. But I just wonder, I mean, there's so much movement now, and they're getting paid so much money if anything's going to switch up at this position.
There was one of those memes today that it was the big dominoes, right? Where they progressively get bigger, and at the bottom it was Trent Baalke's dad had a son, and then at the end of it, it was the entire wide receiver market is ruined. Exactly what happened. Trent Baalke goes and signed Christian Kirk for this crazy deal. Everybody who's a Deebo Samuel, Terry McLaurin, A.J. Brown of the world is just looking at what Davante Adams got, and a guy like Christian Kirk, who's probably the low point of what they're looking at. The Jaguars destroy the entire wide receiver market for maybe multiple years because now these guys are saying, okay, these guys are getting money. The Matthew Dellavedovas of the world, right, Lou? We go back to that one-off
2016 season. NBA. Yeah,
yep.
I get that.
When they got their rights deal and they just started handing out all these crazy contracts, yeah, great players want to get much more money than subpar players and guys that are just middle of the road, right? So if I'm Deebo, I'm looking at that situation saying, I play running back. I also play wide receiver. I also do a lot of things that most wide receivers don't do. I know what my value is. Does San Francisco know what my value is?
Yeah.
But the approach now is, Lou, do these teams, and Tyreek Hill is an example, do they go, okay, we'll get 5 years out of you. When you want to get extended, we'll get you out of here for a big boatload, and then we'll just use those picks for a replacement, which is a way to go about it. But at the same time, proven commodity versus a question mark.
And the position is so valuable too, Gino. You know, like it's different than running back.
Deebo Samuel anything he wants, man.
Yeah,
like,
me too.
Do in this offense, absolutely.
And that's the thing is like you're not gonna because receiver, you're not gonna suddenly wait till the 4th or 5th round like you can at running back. At times, it's too valuable and it's not as easy. It's not as replaceable. You know, a top tier receiver versus a top tier running back, and you're not going to
took to replace Jeremy Maclin,
right?
And Deshaun Jackson,
exactly. They still haven't. I mean, DeVonta Smith didn't have 1,000 yards last year. It's still since 2014 the Eagles haven't had a 1,000-yard receiver. So absolutely. You're not going to take a guy in the first round and just let him walk after 5 years. So I don't know. I don't think again it's going to suddenly become running back where everybody goes cheap and they go through the draft because, again, it's different than running back. You still got to take them early. It's too valuable. Yes. And you're not going to just spend first-round picks all the time on a guy that you're going to get one contract out of. So, but I will say, like, they're going to pay wide receiver 1 still across the NFL. But as you mentioned, like, especially after the Christian Kirk deal, I can see the wide receiver 2 market definitely shifting where teams are going to be way less willing to give, you know, the Kirks of the worlds. And when Nelson Aguilar hit the open market, those kind of players, those 2nd and 3rd tier receivers, they're not going to probably want to give out those contracts since they're definitely going to be inflated now. They'll probably try to bargain shop more. You know, a team like the Eagles might say, hey, we're going to take a Quez Watkins as our 2nd guy, and that's the way we're going to build. Because now the way receivers are getting paid and what DeVonta Smith could get, it's going to cost a whole lot more than it has in the past.
And how does that affect cornerback now? If the guy I'm matching up against and I'm shutting down week in and week out, I know Darius Slay brings it up all the time that he, quote unquote, plays the wrong position because corners see what these wide receivers are getting. It's only going to have to get to this breaking point. Like back in 2008 with the whole mortgage crisis thing, it was like, we can't afford the money that we're putting out there. And that's really what the wide receiver market is becoming. And Lou, I think a good way to look at it is if you're the wide receiver group and you have a whole pizza, right? And then you take away what the wide receivers would get. I think the wide receiver 1 market starts to get a larger chunk, like you said. Like, I'd be okay paying a wide receiver 1 whatever he wants, $25 million for a Deebo. And then,
I'll do it too when I got another guy on a rookie deal like DeVonta Smith. I'm comfortable right now doing it with Deebo. But
that's the approach, I think. One solid veteran who's a proven guy that's still on the right side of 20. Deebo Samuel, for example, is 26. I go out there, I spend assets on that group. If I do take him in the first, I have an additional round, additional year to keep that player cheap while still playing that veteran guy.
And I think that's where the Eagles were thinking.
Does he interchange? Would DeVonta Smith like be the heir to Deebo? Like, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, that's a good way to approach it, I feel.
And I do think the Eagles see it that way too, because they were willing to trade for Calvin Ridley, and that would have cost a 2nd-round pick, and he would have needed a new deal as well. So that wasn't going to be a rental move. So, yeah, I mean, look, I'm pretty comfortable investing a lot in multiple receivers, especially if one's on a rookie deal and you pay the other. But it will be interesting. You look at like what the Dallas Cowboys did with CeeDee Lamb when they already had Amari Cooper. Our team's going to be less willing to select a 2nd receiver in the first round like the Eagles could this year because it's like, should we really waste this pick on a guy that's only going to get 5 years and then we're going to let him walk, or the other guy who we just invested a lot of money into? It'll be really interesting to see how receiver shifts. It's a whole new dynamic, and it's fascinating this offseason to see how it's playing out.
And Amari Cooper is honestly, we talk about the good out of that, like the Tyreek Hill, they get a boatload of good picks. Amari Cooper, they barely got anything for him. I think they just swapped 6th-round picks to take his contract off the books. That's the situation you could be in if you take this approach to it where you don't get, quote-unquote, your guy. Like, was Amari really ever their guy? Like, yeah, they paid him like it, but it seems they got out of that contract relatively quickly. If I'm bringing in Deebo, it's not for 2 years and pawn him off for a 6th-round pick in a couple years. It's either he's here and he's part of this group for at least 5 years, or I don't make the move and I go cheap. And
same with the Cowboys,
wide receiver. Yeah.
You know, I know they have CeeDee Lamb, so they could justify getting rid of Amari Cooper, but I feel like the whole reason you drafted Lamb was to have this luxury of having him and Cooper. But if you were only going to have that for 2 years, then I don't really understand what the point of that move was to begin with, because you're just kind of, it feels lateral, where you're just replacing something you already had. Right. You're still going to have to invest money in Lamb. So yeah, I guess it really just depends on what your mindset is going to be. With the Eagles, like I would be in on Deebo Samuel, Gino. Like you wouldn't have to trade, I think, a lot of future assets, things you might need for a quarterback. You've got a lot of picks this year. It would line up timeline-wise with DeVonta Smith and Quez Watkins. So one thing is interesting, like Eagles Twitter, I think, does need to relax a bit on how aggressive their tone is towards how bad this team needs a star receiver. Like, yeah, they need help, but to make it seem like Jalen Hurts is being set up to fail right now because they haven't landed anybody, as if they don't have a wide receiver one, as if DeVonta Smith doesn't exist. Like, I want one too, but, to say that they need to land a star instead of just like a George Pickens or Sky Moore, I think the tone is a little bit aggressive where it's like how he's got to land one of these guys. And I want one, but I don't know. I don't think it's like a desperate need that they're screwed right now with where they're at.
Do we forget that the former Heisman Trophy winner and future star, current star, future All-Pro, future Pro Bowler, going to be the number one wide receiver in Philadelphia for multiple years? DeVonta Smith is already on the roster. Yes, I would love to get a Garrett Wilson, for example, or match up a Treylon Burks with that size. Yeah. But if they don't get one in round one, I think we know what the path is. I think we know that they're probably going to get one on day 2, day 3 to fill a role because they already believe in what they have. And I believe a lot in Quez Watkins and DeVonta Smith. And
I guess that's part of it too, is how much you believe in Quez. And I think me and you are higher, so we're not as like, got to get one right now kind of, mindset.
No, it wasn't like the Jalen Reagor year where it's like, oh yeah, we got to go and draft one. I mean, this isn't Dorial Green, Beckham, Josh Huff type of bad at wide receiver.
Yeah, you need
Jalen Hurts doesn't have an excuse, man. Like he's got Dallas Goedert, who's a top 5 tight end, top 5 pass catcher, a multitude of running backs that are great pass catchers, 2 wide receivers at least that are downfield players and can make big plays. No, it's not a dire need. A dire need is safety, folks. I mean, that's dire straits. Mm-hmm. Like, we're in drought season for that. Like, we need something or a forest fire is going to come there. I live in Colorado, brother. Like, we're a couple months away here. We don't get rain for 2 months. Yeah, the forest fire is coming. You don't get a safety for 2 decades. Yeah, you got to put that fire out before something happens. I mean, wide receiver, they've taken swings at least.
I got attacked on Twitter today for saying like the tone on Twitter, on Eagles Twitter, makes it seem like DeVonta Smith doesn't exist. I wasn't saying they don't need more receivers, that it couldn't help Jalen Hurts. All I was saying was the tone of how aggressive people feel like this, like they have to land even like a star wide receiver one, as if like a second round receiver wouldn't be good enough. To me, again, I like this core more that they have on the roster right now than most. And I feel like a lot of Jalen Hurts' improvements, we've talked about it before, is on him. It would help bringing in somebody else, but like the heartbreaking mindset of if they don't get Deebo Samuel or DK Metcalf, the sky's falling. I don't really agree with that. And Gino, a lot of that is because of the players in this prospect pool as well that we will get into coming up next, because I think, although they don't need one, they're going to take one pretty early based on the value and the talent. So we'll get into that coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. And guys, today's show is sponsored by Blue Nile. At BlueNile.com, you can celebrate all of life's special moments, from creating the custom engagement ring of her dreams to gifting a classic and timeless jewelry piece, all at prices you won't find at a traditional jeweler. From diamond jewelry, cocktail rings, tennis bracelets, they have it all for this Mother's Day. Get your mom, your wife, the girlfriend, the in-law, something special this year at Blue Nile. Whether she prefers a statement piece or everyday subtle elegance, BlueNile.com has fine jewelry options for every mom. Shop high-quality classic diamond earrings, elegant tennis bracelets, or gemstone pendants, necklaces. Whether it's everyday fine jewelry or wedding rings and bands, they have you covered. If you're looking for jewelry, but you're having trouble what to choose, Blue Nile also has experts on hand 24/7 on the phone or with online chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. This Mother's Day, give mom something she'll treasure forever with fine jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On listeners can get $50 off $500. This podcast exclusive is only good through Mother's Day. Make sure you use the promo code Locked On. That's promo code Locked On, LOCKEDON. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever piece. Go to BlueNile.com today. All right, Gino, let's get into our 2022 NFL Draft wide receiver rankings. And guys, thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. We're continuing our position rankings. We did running back and tight end yesterday. We did quarterback on Friday. Gino, we're going to go more in depth today at receiver at top 10 each, since we are only exclusively talking about this position.
This is arguably one of my favorite to watch every single year. And I think the last 3 years we've kind of been spoiled by how deep these groups are. And once again, Lou, like the whole idea of having to land a star out of this class, like, yes, it is nice, but it's not dire straits like where we needed to go up and get DeVonta Smith last year. It would be great, but wide receivers, I would say 5 through 25, like I'd be okay adding to my football team. And there's plenty of guys with a multitude of different facets that they can bring to this game. I mean, the size difference between a guy like Calvin Austin, the third out of Memphis, and a guy like Treylon Burks, for example, they're going to bring two different elements to your offense. And I think we know what the top guys are. It's kind of like, what do you like going forward? And I think you and I kind of have almost this Eagles like look and lens to the wide receiver position on where we kind of put these guys and how they would fit here in Philly.
So let's take a look first at your top 10 receivers. I think we do, for the most part, agree and see eye to eye on where these guys do rank. So we both have Garrett Wilson and Jameson Williams as our top 2 receivers. You have Ohio State receiver Chris Olave at 3, Arkansas Treylon Burks at 4, Jahan Dotson from Penn State at 5, and then your bottom 5, North Dakota State receiver Christian Watson, USC receiver Drake London, Alabama's John Mechie the third, Memphis receiver Calvin Austin at number 9, and then number 10, you have Sky Moore. So, Gino, like, where was your head at here with your rankings? How much of it had to do with upside? Were there certain traits that you prioritize more than most? Like, where was your head at with this list?
Yeah, that's kind of like how I looked at it. Like Calvin Austin, for example, like not only are you going to get a wide receiver to bring to your team that is elusive, explosive, can get downfield, do things in the yak. Yeah, he can also do that in the return game for you. Like I'm going to bump him up my board a couple spots because of that. Like his ability to do things on special teams in the return game, as well as what he could do out of that slot position, is exactly something that I would want inside of this offense. We thought we had that in Jalen Reagor. Man, Calvin Austin could do it. And that's kind of like how I approach this. And then I took the tier element of it. Like my tier 1 is Garrett Wilson, of course, Jameson Williams, Chris Olave. Then I think it falls off to Treylon Burks, Jahan Dotson, Christian Watson, Drake London. Then tier 3, John Mechie, Calvin Austin, Sky Moore. And then the couple guys who were just right outside of there, I have more tier 3 guys. But the approach I took is, when these guys go on the field, can they match up at the X receiver position and can they win? I think every single one of these guys, maybe Calvin Austin, you got to get on a better matchup, but any one of these individuals, they were asked to play that role for their college. Like these are number 1 wide receivers coming out in a good class. I mean, John Mechie is the number 2 to Jameson Williams, but John Mechie was the number 1 there before Jameson.
Underrated, man. I don't think he's getting a lot of hype. I think he's coming off the injury. He's not as flashy as some of these players, but you know, he Sky Moore, Calvin Austin, those are good value players on day 2 if the Eagles do want to wait and go more defense in the first round. I love that you have Garrett Wilson as number 1. Gino, I feel like if Jameson Williams maybe didn't tear his ACL, that he might be number 1. Yeah, I agree. But I think Wilson, you know, I don't think he's as fast as Williams, but when you combine his explosiveness, his release, the ability to go up and high point the football, contested catch ability, even not being the tallest receiver, I just think he has the most complete game. And I think he would translate perfectly into this Eagles offense that really values interchangeability, versatility at receiver, guys that can play the X, Y, and Z. I really do think that's Garrett Wilson.
I think so as well. And I think Chris Olave kind of just fits into that mold beautifully as well. I mean, he's one of my favorite route runners to watch coming out of the last couple drafts, man. Like he's really a technician for that position, in my opinion. And yeah, your board looks a little different, but we got, I think, 9 out of the 10 same names.
The only guys that we had different, you had Calvin Austin in your list. I had George Pickens from Georgia at number 8. I just love his competitive nature, you know, the ability to high point the football. I think he's somebody on day 2 that's going to be really reliable. I don't know if he'll ever translate as a true wide receiver 1, but especially, and again, my rankings sometimes have the Eagles at heart here with my motivations. I think he would fit this offense really well. So, you know, I think it's kind of pick your poison and what you're looking for in day 2. Calvin Austin, a shiftier, smaller player, where Pickens is a bigger, more physical style of receiver. But outside of that, I think, you know, you had Chris Olave a few spots higher. You had him at 3. I am at 5. You had Christian Watson at 6. I have him at 4. But for the most part, I think we do see eye to eye on these players. I think the drop-off really comes after, I would say, Olave at 5. I think once you get to Drake London, that's a different conversation. And London's tough, man. I mean, I think you know what you're going to get. I think it's unfair that so many people are bringing up JJ Arcega-Whiteside with him when it comes to the conversation of not being able to separate. Like, sure, he can't separate like Wilson or even a bigger receiver like Burks can, but he's also not J-Jaw, guys. Like, you know, not every big receiver is going to have that kind of elite release. But I don't think London's going to be useless at the next level. I think he has some really top tier traits that, you know, again, you got to know what you're getting with him. You're not picking him to be your do it all, like deep threat at the NFL level.
No, and I don't, you know, I'm the biggest proponent of JJ Arcega-Whiteside, and I've watched both Drake and him, I mean, vastly in the Pac-12. JJ did a lot of his stuff on 50-50 ball situations. Drake London can, like, surprisingly move around in the open field and break an obscene amount of tackles.
Right,
he's
way better run after the catch guy than JJ. Not even
I
close.
mean, Drake London's, 60-37, so he's a solid inch and a half taller than JJ. He has a bigger build, a bigger frame than him as well. And, yeah, I know you can get stuck up in that. Don't pick Pac-12 guys, but like I said in the beginning, that's a dead cost. Like, it doesn't matter what their helmet is. Look at the individual prospect. Look at what they're going to bring to your team. Drake London is going to make a team, I believe, like I said, the Buffalo Bills yesterday with James Cook. Like, I think Drake London is a perfect complement to a guy like Stephon Diggs there, Gabriel Davis. I mean, you could even take a look at Green Bay, for example. They could really use a guy like him. You got to look at these guys for who they are, not where they came from, not what came before them. Look at the prospect. And I don't think that's fair. That's why I'm not really a big fan of player comps, because it's like, oh, you made this comparison, but he doesn't do X, Y, and Z. Yeah, because everybody's really kind of their own prospect. Like, nobody's going to be a mirror image. Like, yeah, we drafted Jalen Reagor to replace Deshaun Jackson. They were presumably both raw coming out of college. Doesn't mean they're the same exact person. Doesn't mean it's going to be the same exact thing. Like, yeah, I would love to get a guy like Garrett Wilson if we didn't have DeVonta Smith, but are you sure he could do all the things that DeVonta did for you? Well, you have that in building now. You figured that out. Now go find a guy who doesn't do what he does well, and don't make these comparisons that just are lazy and lackadaisical, because it hurts your understanding of what you're getting and who the player is, because you want to make it as clear as possible through like a window. Make it as clear who this person is.
I think there's a middle ground, Gino, because I will say Drake London was, there was a stat here that he did have the 4th highest percentage of receptions coming from contested catches since 2017. So yeah, like that is where he makes most of his money. And I would prefer, like, especially if I want a big physical guy to complement Smith and Watkins, I prefer Christian Watson, who has better ability to separate Treylon Burks as well. But at the same time, it's like, you know, I think going to the extremes and saying London can't be certain things, I don't know. Again, I think there's a middle ground here with London. Gino, I don't know, though, even like, you know, I think some teams like to build, you've mentioned it before, some teams like to build their receiver core like a basketball team, right? Where you have the big guy, you've got the shifty inside guy, you've got the do-it-all player. But I think, again, the Eagles saw in 2019 and 2020 how much tunnel vision can hurt them. You know, college production with JJ, you know, they were trying to fit a certain role with Reagor. They needed that deep threat, and it did cost them a lot. So I think that this team now values just completeness, interchangeability, and I think that helps you because it just helps you take the best player at the position rather than try to really force something that you want. And I don't think they need contested catches as much as, you know, some people think. Like Quez Watkins, he showed last year that he can go up and get the football. DeVonta Smith, too, was the highest graded contested catch receiver as a rookie, according to PFF. And you got Dallas Goedert. So I don't think it's like a dire need anyway. I think they can stick to these boards and probably do better than London, even though I don't think he's going to be a complete bust. Today's episode of Locked On Eagles is brought to you by Built Bar. It's a protein bar that tastes just like a candy bar. Replace your guilty pleasure, that Reese's Cup, that Hershey's bar, the Nestle's Crunch, whatever your sweet tooth, with a Built Bar. It's all of the same flavor and none of the guilt. Covered in 100% chocolate, Built Bars are incredible and they're healthy. Only 130 calories in most bars, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of loaded protein. Plus, there's a flavor for everybody. You've got mint brownie, coconut, coconut, almond, and new for this month, you've got white chocolate cookies and cream. White chocolate is my favorite kind of chocolate, weirdly enough. It was the Hershey's cookies and cream that got me into it. The Built Bar white chocolate cookies and cream, it's replaced Hershey's for me because, again, it's super healthy compared to a candy bar, which usually has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. I can get you 15% off today at Built.com on your first order of Built Bars when you use the promo code LOCKED15. That's LOCKED15 for any flavor of Built Bars, including the first ever protein-infused marshmallow bars, which have cinnamon churro flavors, coconut marshmallow, and banana cream pie. Again, 15% off at Built.com when you use the promo code LOCKED15. That's LOCKED15 for 15% off your Built Bars.
I think the interchangeability element really is how you have to attack this wide receiver position, because you look at what Cincinnati brought to that group last year versus what the Rams had. I mean, Cincinnati's big athletic guys that are going to beat you up each time you take them man-to-man. The Rams, I mean, the complete opposite. I mean, just guys that can route run. And same thing in Buffalo. They had no receiver over 6 feet, I think, 2 years ago. So it's just finding guys that you can create chess matchups for, just like on defense where we talked about the edge position. No longer is it just a 4-3 defensive end who puts his hand in the dirt. Like, no longer are you just an X receiver who's got to be big like Alshon Jeffrey. No, if you can win man-to-man, they're going to find a spot for you.
And if it's close, though, like, you will prefer certain traits and there will be tiebreakers. But again, it's kind of like best player available versus need. You're not going to force it.
Right. Like if you were going, let's say, for example, they were going to pick between Treylon Burks and Jahan Dotson, right?
Yeah.
Two completely and vastly different prospects.
Right.
Do they both do things inside an offense that could fit multiple different schemes? I fully believe so. Yeah, Treylon Burks can win one-on-one in short areas on the slant. He can win downfield. Jahan Dotson, a much faster runner than Treylon Burks, but can still be moved all around the formation and win in multiple different areas. Don't get hung up going into this draft saying, 1, we need a star, and 2, we need so-and-so position. No, just get a guy that can really bring multiple elements to this offense. Think of it like a safety that can also play linebacker, who can also cover man-to-man like a corner. That's really what you need in these wide receivers.
Yeah, and again, I think when you have DeVonta Smith and Quez Watkins, you can just take the best player at these positions. You know, Treylon Burks might not even be the separator and have the short area explosiveness of Garrett Wilson, Jameson Williams, or Chris Olave. Your top 3 receivers here, my top 2. But Burks is kind of like, you know, I know there's a lot of Deebo Samuel comparisons. I'm not saying he's DK Metcalf, but he's one of those guys that's like, yeah, he might not do everything great, but he does a few things really, really well that, especially with the Eagles, he's going to be your wide receiver 2 or 3. You'll take that, you know. So, Gino, I pulled up the stat too, again, to go back to the contested catch thing. Like Quez Watkins last year, he went 8 for 15 on contested plays, resulting in a 53.3% contested catch rate. That was good enough to be ranked 33rd in the league. And that's somebody that's mostly penciled in as like just a deep threat. I mean, that's not really true. So again, overall, just take the most complete receiver, the best player on your board. And even London, though, that doesn't mean it's not London. Just take him for the right reasons. You know, I think that's the theme, is like, take the receiver for the right reasons and don't force things. I'm comfortable with any of your 7 and mine as well. Or honestly, the top 10 in the first 2 rounds.
Oh, I completely agree. I'm comfortable taking any of those guys I have on my list in the top 2 rounds.
Yeah.
And there's even a couple more. Like, you could throw George Pickens on my list. Like, David Bell is just right outside there.
Jalen Tolbert too, Gino, is going to be somebody late from South Alabama. I really like Tolbert as a late day steal.
Yeah, I love Wan'Dale Robinson. Like, he's just such an explosive player, man. I mean, you could go down the list of how many guys we have. And we have value picks, too, that you and I threw out to each other, because there's just so many different flavors that you could get at the wide receiver position. I use the Baskin-Robbins example all the time. Like, this draft more than ever, Lou, I really believe that. Like, you're going into this year with 4 guys who could potentially be the first wide receiver taken. Do all of them play exactly the same? Not one bit. And that's what makes it super
That's what makes
intriguing.
it tough, too, because I don't know, Gino, right now. I think I put my money at BetOnline to Garrett Wilson being the first pick, but I could see Jameson Williams. I could see Treylon Burks. Again, I think each team they have certain philosophies on receiver and they all differ. And so do these prospects. There's, again, you can pencil in the physical, bigger receivers like Burks and Watson and London, but Burks and Watson also have explosive traits. And then you have more of the deep threats and the shiftier fast receivers like Wilson, Williams, and Olave. And then the technicians like Dotson and Sky Moore and, maybe even John Mechie later on. I have no idea, and that's kind of fun. It's not like last year where you knew, okay, it's going to be Chase, Smith, and Waddle in some order, and that's it. Here it's like, I don't know, man, if Christian Watson was the first receiver off the board, I probably wouldn't bat an eye.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of mock drafts we've seen Drake London taken high by teams like the Jets, for example. And
Daniel Jeremiah had him at 10 to the Jets in his last mock.
Yeah, it was kind of like last year, like especially after we kind of got closer to the draft, we knew that Miami was infatuated with Jalen Waddle. Like we knew Jamar Chase more than likely would have been that pick, and we knew DeVonta Smith was probably going to go to Philadelphia or the Giants, whoever made that pick first, and we know who it was. I have no freaking idea who's going to go in this first round,
or to what
let
team.
alone to any wide receiver. Like, I could say like boom, boom, boom. Like they would probably fit good there. I mean, heck, Jerry Jones could say, hey, I want my Arkansas boy and Treylon Burks, and I'm going to go up and get him. Right? Yeah. Oh, yeah, dude. I mean, that's his alma mater. His grandson goes there. Makes all the sense in the world that they would make that pick.
I'd love to steal him from Dallas, just like
the
Eagles stole DeVonta Smith last year from the Giants. If they can do it 2 years in a row, because Treylon Burks, I think of these receivers, again, I really like a lot of them, and I went back and forth each day. I had a different wide receiver, 1 and 2 and 3. It felt like. But I will say, of all these guys, like Treylon Burks, I had some of the most fun watching. He's a fun evaluation.
Tape, bro. His Alabama tape is some of the best tape.
He outran like five guys on that second level downfield. Like his breakaway speed for that size is ridiculous.
Yeah, throws 40 time out. Like stick to the tape for these guys for sure.
It's like the DK Metcalf stuff. They read way too much into his off-season workouts.
You're gonna tell me a fast, athletic guy who looks like he's chiseled by the gods isn't going to be able to separate one-on-one in the NFL. Like, give me a break. Like, sometimes just don't overthink these guys. And I think the top 5, for example, like it's easy not to overthink them. Like, I'm not going to overthink Jameson Williams' ability to really be an explosive chess piece in my offense. Chris Olave, I know I'm going to be able to put up against most cornerbacks that are going to press him, and he'll be able to be a technician. Treylon Burks, I could really do whatever the heck I want with a guy of that size. So I don't think you're going to overthink these picks. And this class, it just seems like all of these guys really have their role, and I think we kind of know like who these players are. I don't like the JJ pick a couple years ago. You were kind of saying, okay, I understand what they see. There's a little bit of a ceiling there, but like he was in my top 10 a couple years ago. I don't know if he's in this top 10 now, if he's coming out here. Like this is a very good class, Lou.
Let's take a final look at our receiver rankings. Top 10, we'll start with Gino. He had Garrett Wilson, number 1, Jameson Williams, 2, Chris Olave, 3, Treylon Burks, 4, and Jahan Dotson, 5. That was his top 5. The bottom 5 was Christian Watson, Drake London, John Mechie, and Calvin Austin, with Sky Moore finishing out the top 10. For me, we agreed here with our top 2, Garrett Wilson and Jameson Williams. I had Treylon Burks at 3 and Christian Watson 4. The explosive, physical, tall receivers. Then you've got Chris Olave rounding out my top 5. The bottom was Drake London, Dotson, George Pickens, Sky Moore, and John Mechie. So overall, I think we have a couple guys at different spots, maybe 1 or 2 spots higher or lower. You had Calvin Austin on your list. I had George Pickens. But overall, I think we do see eye to eye in this class. And, I think you can – I don't know. I don't want to say guarantee, but I think there's a really, really good chance one of those first 3 picks for the Eagles is going to be a pass catcher at this position.
I just hope a bad thing like missing out on Mecole Hardman doesn't happen to us again, man. Like they were right there.
Or they take the wrong one and watch 5 others.
Lou, here's something that I really want to figure out, right? When they talked about, and this was Jeffrey Lurie saying that selection that JJ was between him and Paris Campbell. If Mecole Hardman's on the board and he's not in that discussion, I think I'd be
Well, I mean, you look at the style of player Paris Campbell was. I think it would have made sense that they would have liked Mecole Hardman too. The thing that bothered me about that was he mentioned right after, he's like, oh yeah, and then Terry McLaurin, he was the steal after, right? He almost like overlooked DK Metcalf and acknowledged McLaurin because McLaurin at the time wasn't seen as somebody that anybody would take in the second round, and he almost didn't acknowledge the one that most people said was a clear miss that should have been a first round pick to begin with in Metcalf. So yeah, hopefully that doesn't happen again this year. And there's no more what ifs at this position, man. I'm just ready to have it solidified. And I think they're on the right track already with DeVonta Smith and Quez Watkins.
I think they've definitely turned a corner. Like they hit home on that final straightaway Kentucky Derby weekend coming up here in a few weeks. They're moving on and past this. Okay, we're just going to go with what we know, right? Like we got a big X receiver. We got a Z who could kind of move around in a slot possession receiver. Same formula that they've used since the days of Jason Avant and even prior to that. They're finally moving away from that with Quez Watkins, DeVonta Smith, in my opinion. I think this is the final cherry on top. Like they're going to get a guy who might not be over 6 feet tall. He might not be over 200 pounds, but he's going to be a versatile piece that they can use on this team in a way that I'm really excited to see what Nick Sirianni can do with more and more and more capital at his disposal.
All right, Gino, we'll dive into the lines tomorrow, offensive and defensive trenches. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Eagles wherever you get the podcast. We're free and available Monday through Friday on all podcast platforms in video form as well on YouTube. Make sure you hit us up on Twitter. What do you think of our rankings at Locked On Birds, at DiBiase LOE, and at GC24_football? Thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Now make sure your second listen is the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast with Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker. They bring the draft to life each and every day, giving you the latest insight on prospects. They're doing their rankings as well. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts, and the draft is next Thursday. So get your content. We've got it right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. As always, thank you for downloading. Thank you for listening and watching, and let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.